one person, for example, that ago said something like, well, it's a choice until it becomes a dependency. And I think that's a widely held belief. It's a widely held belief across the country. It's just, in a sense, blameful, really. It's saying, they just, stopped. Why didn't they just stop before it became a problem? And that's what most people believe. What we know concretely, in fact, there are 270 of them. There are 270 genes that increase the risk of developing alcohol use disorder. I'm just going to focus on that one for this one, because there's 46 million people struggling at this point right now. So if you have 270 genes, each of which in different ways instruct your body that alcohol is something you need and want, it's hard to fight. If you have that and you have really any trauma, that's what we're seeing. If you struggle with mental health, depression, anxiety in your life, if you've got PTSD because you suffered some very real trauma, any trauma like that, difficulty, in a relationship, people that are victims of domestic violence, for example. These are people who are under tremendous stress. They have a genetic disorder and they live in the United States. And why do I talk about that? Well, it's really these three things together with the problem. In the US, you can't leave your gas tank without seeing alcohol on the shelves. You can't go to the pharmacy to get Advil because there's alcohol on the shelves. You can't go grocery shopping to, and not see alcohol throughout the store, really. It's become so pervasive and it's in every place that you can't get away from it. This is actually not at all the truth, not even in the beginning, because 100% of Americans essentially are exposed to alcohol in their teens, right? They're all getting exposed in high school, raised in college. And if they go in and they're, exposed because they hang out with friends, as soon as you're 21, you go do. It's just what people do, right? So you're getting exposed. That's number one. If you're exposed to something you have 150 genes for, that's increasing your risk of using it, and you're anxious, which, let's face it, it's 20, 25, there's a lot of anxiety going on. A lot of disruption in the world, a lot of things upside down, and people are afraid. They're losing healthcare benefits. There's all kinds of things, right? So there's all these issues out there. That stress is going to increase the probability that those genes demand you relieve it. And if you're exposed and you need that relief, it's going to carry. And it starts out with just binge drinking usually, and then it progresses. It's not even a choice when they binge drink. And why is that? Because when they get to 2 drinks, what drinks do is they shut down your frontal lobe, the frontal part of your brain. That's the part that helps you make decisions. It's the part that helps you anticipate the future. It's how you think through problems. It's analytical. If you don't have that functioning, how are you going to make a great choice about your 3rd drink, your 4th drink, your 5th drink, especially when your genetics are pulling you? And generally, these patients also have genetics that increase their sensitivity, meaning they can handle more alcohol than other people. They're often much more tolerant. So they get to 4 or 5, not as impacted as perhaps some of their friends, because they usually get to 2 and they basically have to stop. But they can go to 4, 5, or 6 and still carry on a decent conversation, and towards the end, not so much. But when you're at that level, that's early level, just binge drinking, no other daily drinking, no other thing, already causing damage. Damage enough that this will progress over time to stage 4, where you're basically drinking 24 hours a day. At no point along that cascade, stage 1, like cancer, all the way through stage 4, alcohol use disorder, like cancer. And, like cancer, it's spread everywhere. Well, alcohol use disorder is also spread everywhere. It's causing disease. It's affecting your gut function. It's affecting your brain. You're having problems with liver and pancreas function. So many systems are being impacted. All the way through that process, you're not ever making a choice. You get exposed, and there it is. You shared with me, for example, that you started using cannabis at 19. Well, guess what? The brain actually isn't finished forming until 25. Countless studies show, including my co-founder's studies about this, that if you are exposed to substances in adolescent brains, and then consider up till 25 still an adolescent brain, if you're exposed, the probability of developing a disorder as an adult later on, or as a full-fledged adult, let's say, is substantially greater. The younger they are, too, the worse it gets. So if they get exposed to cocaine at 14, they're going to use cocaine in their life. If they're exposed to cannabis, if they're exposed to alcohol. In fact, it goes all the way into utero for, example, my co-founder, Dr. Lisa Shido, is a statistician, data scientist, and a researcher. And she published papers on the fact that if you're exposed to cocaine in utero, you're the fetus, and the baby, that's in there, and you're getting exposed to whatever the mom's taking. If they're exposing you to alcohol, if they're exposing you to tobacco and nicotine, those babies are born with the same predilection just from the exposure. So these aren't choices. These are medical disorders. These are genetic medical illnesses. You know what other genetic medical illnesses we have? We have diabetes. We have hypertension. We have heart disease. You know in your family if you have a history of breast cancer, right? People know their family histories because they want to think about what their family history means for themselves and their risk. So when you have a family where you have an uncle, a grandparent, somebody on the other side of the family too who had alcohol use disorder, you already know that there's a risk. And people know whole families where this happens. And yet the country still doesn't believe this is a genetic medical disorder. It's obvious. It's very obvious that it is. But in the genes, it's dead set obvious. When we do genetic study to our patients, the first thing I tell them is how many genes they had that put them at risk. And the second thing I tell them is this disease is not your fault. So if I can do one thing, what I want to convey to all of you is compassion. We have limitless compassion for a patient who gets lung cancer. You're 60 years old, you're at the prime of your life, you're about to retire, you're all excited, but you've smoked for 30 years and you develop lung cancer. People cook for you and bring you flowers and take care of you and call you to make sure you're okay. And they wrap around and support you, even though the disease they may think was a choice. Why? Why with alcohol, opioid use, other things that are all genetic disorders? Why do we blame? What's that about? And it's about a long perpetuated methodology that has been cultivated by AA philosophy, frankly, that is judgmental and that does put people down and that erase their humanity and make them somebody that you relegate to, well, you just live under bridges. You're not worth anything. You don't try. You don't care about anybody but yourself. And I have to tell you, I've treated now 140,000 patients with addiction between my previous two companies and now North Star's really alone. This is not a choice.